BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Well, it is October, and I said it during this month we were going to be delving into the paranormal. We've done a couple uploads about some material related to ghosts and hauntings on this channel, and that's where we're going to be picking up today, because I thought it would be a very good opportunity to talk about Waverly Hills Sanatorium, which is located in the state of Kentucky here in America. But I was always calling it Waverly Hills Sanitarium, so excuse me if I slip up, but they do spell it with an O, so it's Sanatorium. And I learned about this one about 15 years ago, and as you see, my memory was a little bit hazy, misremembered a few vowel sounds, but I saw it on television. They did this special called Ghosts of Waverly Hills Sanatorium that was talking about how it is possible that they have located the most haunted place in America. And I wanted to do an upload about it on the channel to talk about some of the paranormal claims that they had made, because when we do uploads about ghosts, hauntings, poltergeist, things of that nature, I really want to know, number one, what are people experiencing? What's really going on? Number two, what is the story behind it? How did these things happen? And then we're like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I have to tell you, as I've been reading up on these stories of the Ghost of Waverly Hills Sanatorium, I found that it really had a very different answer than what I had expected. To help us out with our discussion, we're going to be jumping over to a website called Completely Kentucky. Once again, we're talking about Waverly Hills Sanatorium, which is outside of Louisville, Kentucky. The sanatorium opened in 1910 as a two-story hospital to accommodate 40 to 50 tuberculosis patients. In the early 1900s, Jefferson County, Kentucky, was ravaged by an outbreak of tuberculosis, also known as the White Plague. And just going to jump ahead, though, because there's some different things that take place in the development of Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and there's a bigger reason why it became famous for ghost hunting. Due to the constant need for repairs on the wooden structures, need for a more durable structure, as well as the need for more beds so that people would not be turned away due to the lack of space, construction of a five-story building that could hold more than 400 patients began in 1924. The new building opened on October 17, 1926, but after the introduction of streptomycin, Streptomycin, I'm not a doctor, not sure if I'm mispronouncing that, streptomycin in 1943, the number of tuberculosis patients gradually lowered until there was no longer need for such a large hospital. The remaining patients were sent to Hazelwood Sanatorium, I always want to say sanitarium, in Louisville. Waverly Hills closed in June of 1961. Okay, so that's a very basic introduction to the subject, but the reason why it became such a famous place for ghost hunting is because their claim was that 63,000 people had died in this area, in this sanatorium, on these grounds. So it was like, it's just an epicenter of death and possible lurkings for around of spirits, spiritual activity, paranormal activity. This is a very large concentration of it because so many people had died here. So when it comes to this one, I should say, though, that if you go to their website, Waverly Hills Sanatorium, that's talking all about paranormal tours in the Louisville area, I found this new thing on Google that has like a question and answer set up, and they actually have a lot of those there. A lot of people are just asking, how much does it cost? And then it just gives you the answer. It's a question and answer feature that Google now has. It's $75 to spend the overnight in Waverly Hills Sanatorium to try and experience some paranormal activity. And in addition to that, there was a movie called Death Tunnel, which was filmed in 2005 on the premises. I have not seen that one yet, but that is definitely at the high of my watch list. I would love to watch that one. And I believe somewhere in the credits of Death Tunnel, they even did a memorial to all the patients who died at Waverly Hills Sanatorium. But when I said there were some things that I found that really were surprising to me, I began reading up on this, and I found one of those. It wasn't obviously not Wikipedia. It's a different website that had wiki in the title, and what they were doing was they were challenging all of the famous claims about Waverly Hills Sanatorium. This whole notion of 63,000 people passing away there, or even 63,000 people even being present at Waverly Hills Sanatorium as patients. I mean, you heard the description there that we read off of the Kentucky website when they were saying that it was meant to accommodate people in the hundreds. According to that website, they were saying that the number of people died as a maximum in 1 year was just over 150 people. And even if we're going to go from 1926 to 1961, and we're just going to use the number 150, once again, that would be a high number. 100. Let's also just throw out 45 years thereabouts. That comes out to 6,750 people would have passed away at Waverly Hills Sanatorium. So they're really trying to show that this whole image of how this place was perhaps the most haunted area of America, or perhaps the most haunted place in the entire world. There's a lot of rumors that are going around about Waverly Hills Sanatorium. And I also found another very large rumor that we'll talk about in a second. But the next thing to say is that around this time, when I saw that first television special that they did on Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and they have many of them out there, it was more about how it was the most haunted place in America. And my sister had recently talked to me. I mean, right after I saw the show, my sister talked to me, whatever the opposite of recently is. Then the next day or something, she was talking to me about how she found some TV show or movie about the most haunted place in America. And I'm like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's called Waverly Hills Sanatorium. And she's like, no, it's a different place. It's in a different part of America. It's not in Kentucky. I was like, no, I just saw the special on TV. It's called Waverly Hills Sanatorium. It's about this tuberculosis hospital where all these people died. And then she showed me the show that she was talking about, a completely different place, and I don't even remember where that was. But the whole point is, many people are making these claims about how there are different, about how their location is the most haunted place in America. And the next rumor that I would like to talk about is involving an individual named Mary Lee, and that is not her real name. That is an alias that has been given to her, and she might have some other aliases or names that are going around. Now, when it comes to Mary, I thought about even doing the entire upload on her because I started reading up some things about a nurse that had committed suicide in room 502 at Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and that this is a very frequent sighting when the paranormal investigators are looking into the situation. And a big point that I would like to stress is, if you've seen this on a show, I haven't seen the Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures episodes, if they've done one on this one or some similar programs, maybe they're going to be using some different terminology, or they're going to be talking about the story in a different way, or some of the details may have changed. And I think that there's a very big reason for this. But I was reading this little blurb about Mary Lee, and in many places, they don't even identify her by name. They just say that a nurse committed suicide at Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and it was either done by hanging, but in one instance, they said that she jumped off the balcony of a room, and once again, 4 or 5 story building, and that she committed suicide that way because she had either contracted tuberculosis herself, or she had found out that she was pregnant, or perhaps a combination of both. She learned that she was pregnant with tuberculosis. And I said that I thought about doing an entire upload on her because I wanted to know what her story was. But it turns out, as I was reading through many different threads, they were saying that I guess you'd just say the companies that are involved with the ghost hunting tours have not revealed the real name of this Mary Lee. Once again, there might be some other aliases attributed to her, or some different pseudonyms that are attributed to this Mary Lee floating around out there, because number one, that's not her real name. Number two, they have not even revealed her real name because they're saying that they want to protect the privacy of local residents who may be related to her. But that just brought me to a standstill. That just brought me to, hitting the wall, because I was like, well, I can't really investigate any further if just this is a person whose name I cannot find, and you're not going to say who she is. How do I know if the story is true or false? Because, as we said, though, when we did our upload on Patrick Henry, Ghost of Virginia, talking about the ghost of Sarah Henry that is perhaps haunting the Scotchtown estate in Virginia, where Patrick Henry used to live. We're talking about the founding father of America. They're making a lot of claims about how they see this woman in a white nightgown with long flowing hair. And I just asked the question, have you ever heard very frequent ghost stories about a woman in a light-colored nightgown who has long flowing hair, usually dark-colored hair? And one of them that I began to recall that I didn't mention last time was one that we had at the summer camp that I went to, not here in West Virginia, but in a different place. It was actually across the state line into Virginia. And they said that there was the Lady of the Lake. That was one of the ghosts that would, quote unquote, haunt the summer camp. would haunt that vicinity, and some people would see the image of a woman, once again wearing a light-colored nightgown, walking across the water of the lake at various times at night. And I mean, number one, I'm very skeptical about these things because I want to be like, what exactly is it that people are seeing? Is it just a reflection, or does someone see something out of the corner of their eye and they get really spooked and then they run away and they didn't know 100% what they saw? But I think there could be something so much more valuable in looking at, well, why are people consistently seeing a woman with long dark hair wearing a light-colored nightgown in various places? I mean, is there something about that particular image that is just trying to make the darkness more human? And I say this very genuinely because, and I don't mean to be too repetitive because I've said some of the stuff on the channel before, but some people believe that the reason why there are Bigfoot sightings is because people are looking at a dark forest and they see this image of a tall, hairy ape. And it's like trying to add somewhat of a conscious, animal-like component to the dark forest, something that can, when I say conscious, meaning something that can move around, something that is a creature. It's turning the dark forest into a type of creature, and it's all just like a trick that the mind is playing on oneself. I'm quite curious if these other sightings of a woman wearing the light-colored nightgown with the long dark hair is also just trying to put this type of conscious face onto just the darkness. But I think that it's just a bit of a mystery, and we definitely do not have 100% certainty of this, of any of the things that I just said. I think that that is just something that we're just going to have to keep asking questions about, and maybe we will not get definitive answers on all of these ghost sightings in our lifetime. When I was watching some of the programs about Waverly Hills Sanatorium earlier today, I saw that there was a whole lot of the EVP going on, the EVP readers, and people are just listening for some noises, and then they're trying to decipher what these noises mean. I'm not impressed by that. I'd be much more just fascinated with what are the stories that people are telling, because then you learn about how is the human thought process moving. And I think that we can also expand upon that in the discussion, just talking about this individual that maybe her name was Mary Lee, maybe it's something similar to that, the nurse who committed suicide at Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and perhaps her ghost is haunting the area. Number one, I just want to be very frank and ask the blunt challenge question. Do you believe, if they haven't revealed her real name, that perhaps that this is somewhat of a fictitious story that has been concocted by these ghost tour companies? Or number two, do you believe that this is a real story and they're probably telling the truth about trying to protect the privacy of local residents? By the way, when I said I found one of those wiki websites that had some challenges to the Waverly Hills claims, that this one's actually called WikiWand, and I just pulled it up here, and I just want to read the exact quotation. Estimates vary widely of how many people died at Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Some say that it was around 63,000. However, there is no documentation to prove that. There is, however, documentation to prove that the worst year for death at Waverly was 152 people. And they will cite some sources that we'll talk about in just a second. But this is what they also want to say. The hospital had fewer than 70 combined years during which it was operating. If the most people that died in a year was 152, which seems quite low as it was a tuberculosis hospital, how can there be 63,000 people that died? And they also provide a possible number, just over 8,000 people. I also just did something in 45 years during the height of their tuberculosis epidemic and got 6,750. They're estimating that perhaps somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 people. I mean, we are saying that is perhaps a more accurate number. But they do have this here, that the document that they cite is the autobiography written by former Assistant Medical Director Dr. J. Frank W. Stewart, who worked at Waverly Hills Sanatorium from 1945 to 1955, and they do have some paragraphs here from his book as well, just saying where this stuff is coming from. Okay, I can totally accept that shows like the Sci-Fi Channel and shows on the Sci-Fi Channel, as well as Discovery Channel, and even some of these ghost tour companies might be inflating the numbers, yes, because they want to draw a crowd, they want people to listen to their message, and some people even say the Discovery Channel turns into the paranormal conspiracy theory channel. All of those things have a certain degree of truth to it. But as I said, what's much more fascinating is that when people are saying things about what they've experienced personally, firsthand, and at the same time, though, I think that this was definitely something that really just had a very chilling presence, and there is a certain sense of morbidity that is associated with Waverly Hills Sanatorium, a place where people in the thousands would have died. All right, it's not 63,000, it's 6,300 people died. That is still a very morbid place. And I think that would even give me the creeps trying to explore that type of location. And also, the other thing that we should say is it's good to be critical of people's stories and try to find out where the truth is, because that's the very important thing that we want to do with either the skeptic response or just any type of response. You want to know where is the truth and where is the fiction and what really happened and what are people making up. But the other thing to say about that particular type of thing is it can also be approached with a certain sense of respect for humanity, as well as acknowledging people's right to individuality and recognizing that people are going to think different things than we do and believe different things than we do. And all of this is just totally normal. But some of the points that they want to share in this WikiWan challenge piece is that if these numbers were actually correct, that 63,000 people died there, they would have to have had a hospital that was meant to have 400 people in it normally and functionally, having one person die every hour in operation for a number of years. And there is a kind of lighter response that says, I wouldn't call it garbage simply because the TV show thought it could boost ratings by staging a paranormal meeting. The hospital was originally too small to accommodate the amount of patients that were brought in. It was later remodeled and made bigger. At this time, Waverly Hills Hospital, TB, or the White Plague, was overtaking the countryside at an alarming rate. There was no cure. All they could do for treatment was perform a surgical procedure in which most of the ribs, muscles, and skin were taken out to allow the lungs to contract with fresh air and help them breathe. There were more deaths than survivors of the surgery. No one said that one person died in an hour, died every hour as a result of the TB. The TB was the killer that claimed most of the victims. And this expands upon some other things that they were talking about in this article here, which says that one of the treatments for TB, very specifically, they would remove 3 of a patient's ribs to see if the organs could contract more easily. I didn't believe that the first time that I read because, they have what other people are talking about and they're giving some skeptic responses. And I was like, is this real? I mean, and what they're saying there is, yes, indeed, these were real treatments. That is the horrific part in its own. There comes a point in life when you really can recognize that the truth, it can be stranger than fiction, as cliched as that sounds, or you can find that the true story actually has an enormous amount of value, and you don't even need to provide any additives. You can just see that, people did some crazy things, and like even just when you hear about doctors didn't wash their hands before surgery until the late 1800s or thereabout. But actually, many people claim it was indeed 1 death per hour, and thoracoplasty was actually the removal of some ribs and using the chest muscles to permanently collapse a lung that was too far gone to save. Well, I'm not a doctor. Thoracoplasty, a new word for me. But, once again, one person would be dying every hour for how long? I mean, the numbers really don't add up. And let's not kid ourselves. Networks get fluffy on the details. Networks may even fabricate certain pieces of info because they want to boost ratings. They're all about ratings because if they didn't have an audience, they wouldn't have any type of show. But let's keep going for just a little bit here. On the Waverly Hills Sanatorium article, it says that there was featured in the MTV show Fear. But on the MTV Fear article, it says that the episode took place in British Columbia, Canada. Anyone know which one is right? And Waverly, they do this to protect location. Some scenes are possibly recreated elsewhere, and British Columbia often has cheaper production rates. So they're saying that perhaps even some videography that you see of Waverly Hills Sanatorium is not filmed in Louisville, and it could have been filmed in British Columbia. Networks do this as well, because I hate to go back to Bigfoot, always comparing Bigfoot to ghosts, but when we did our upload on the skunk ape, the Floridian sightings of a particular variety of a Sasquatch, there was even this one thing where one guy is coming forward saying that he has this huge dispute with finding Bigfoot because he is a Bigfoot researcher, a skunk ape researcher, and they asked him to fake and stage and the dramatization in his backyard as opposed to going out in the wild. And he's like, this is outrageous, this is ridiculous, what are you doing? Networks do this all the time. But I think the more valuable claim is that an enormous amount of people were in this hospital. As we said, it operated for decades. If these numbers are correct, opening around 1910, expanding the facility in 1924, completing its reconstruction in 1926, and then closing in 1961. There are actually some plans right now to turn this location, Waverly Hills Sanatorium, into a 4-star hotel. That should be rather nice. I would definitely like to stay there now. I would rather use my $75 toward the hotel room price. I'm sure it'll be more like $475, but I wouldn't pay the $75 just to stay there overnight in some dirty concrete floor. But the other thing I would say in conclusion is that there's also a reference to this in an episode of The Simpsons, and that Waverly Hills, which is named for Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Waverly Hills is actually the upscale neighborhood of Springfield, in which the show The Simpsons is set. I saw that online here as well. And so that's just some trivia, throwing that out there. But, many people did die in this hospital. As we said, the numbers have to be in the thousands. If we're using the low estimates, it seemed like between 6,300 and 8,700 people died in this hospital. Very tragic. And, God rest their souls. It's a very, very sad thing that, and there must be some type of morbid element, and there must be some type of feeling that a person would get just knowing that many people died there because of tuberculosis. And then you hear these things about people are just removing 3 of their ribs to try and, allow the muscles in the lungs to contract in a different way. And it just sounds, absolutely horrific. There's your horror story. Who needs the ghosts? But, I would really like to know your response to that particular type of challenge question. Do you believe these things about Mary Lee, where if they're not giving her real name or they're not telling you the real stories and all the details behind this, that it's simply a fabrication? Or do you think that there could be some genuine truth in it and that they are just trying to protect the identity of her relatives, descendants, this, that, and the other? I would love to hear your responses to the challenge questions below. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so. But most importantly, please drop some comments below. It's October. We're getting into the paranormal for a little bit. And that's all for me now. Until next time.